Could it happen? Will it happen?
How often will it happen?
These are all questions that can be answered using probability and likelihood of an event occurring. In this video, we're going to talk about probability and the likelihood that an event will occur. First, we need to speak about a couple of terminology words. When we are dealing with experiments or investigations of what could happen, we are also dealing with what all the possible results of that experiment. These are called outcomes. A favorable outcome then is when I have this experiment and I notice that there's something that can happen and I want that to happen. So it's what we call a desired outcome. For example, you have a spinner here and you want to spin the spinner. How many total possible outcomes are there? Taking a look at the spinner, we see 3 ones, a 2, a 3, and a 4. So there are 6 total possible outcomes. Then we can talk about favorable. So say I want to spin an even number. Okay. How many favorable outcomes do I have now? Well, again, taking a look at the spinner, an even number is a multiple of 2. We see a 2 and a 4. Those are our only even numbers. So what are the favorable outcomes? They're 2 and 4. So how many ways can spinning a number less than 2 occur? That goes again into the outcomes, total outcomes of a situation. Yes, we have 3 different ones, but each of them are their own space on the spinner. So how many different ways can spinning a number less than 2 occur? How many is key? How many means it wants a solid number. It doesn't want me to make a list, or it's not asking me what they are. They literally want to know how many. So give me a number. Well, let's see. Less than 2. So coming back up here, the ones that are less than 2 are 1, 1, and 1. They're the only ones that are less than 2. And there's 3 of them. So how many? 3. All right. Now let's talk a little bit about probability. Probability we'll be discussing here and for the next couple of sections in this unit. Probability is simply a number that represents the likelihood that an event is going to happen. And we normally use a scale anywhere from 0 to 1. Now, I know what you're saying. I hear a lot of percentages with probability, though, Mrs. Struble. And yeah, you're right. But it's still on a scale of 0 to 1, and I'll show you why. Here is what we call our likelihood scale. Okay. When we say that an event is impossible, okay, that means it's at a 0 probability or a 0%. It's the same thing. We can convert these numbers to percentages, and that's how we normally see percents, or that's how we normally see probabilities written as percents. It's just easier for us to generally understand. Okay. Now, if I say a situation is unlikely to happen, it means it could happen, but I'm not gonna wait around for it to happen, right? Because it's probably not gonna happen. we say that this is a 1/4 probability or 25% probability. When something is equally likely or unlikely to happen, we say it's got a 50% probability. But what that really means is it's got 1/2 of a probability on the scale of between 0 and 1. Okay? It's equally likely or unlikely. Today it might be likely, tomorrow probably unlikely. So it kind of flip-flops back and forth. And then we have likely, which is at 75% or 3/4. And finally, certain. It is absolutely certain that you are probably going to have homework at some point in time in your academic career. I'm sorry, it's just kind of the way it is. That is 100% probability that it's going to occur. So how do we use this likelihood scale? Let's do an example. Let's say the weatherman comes on and says, hey, there's an 80% chance of rain, a 50% chance of thunderstorms, and a 15% chance of hail tomorrow, all tomorrow. So how would we describe the likelihood of these things occurring? How would we describe likelihood of rain tomorrow, thunderstorm tomorrow? What about hail? Okay, so let's take a look at these numbers again. Rain is at 80% chance, which means it falls somewhere right around here on our likelihood scale. Okay, we would consider this likely to happen. Let me get that going here. Rain. There we go. Okay, what about thunderstorms? Thunderstorms is a 50% chance. Well, 50% right there. Okay, so we would say that this is equally likely or unlikely to happen. Maybe, maybe not kind of deal. Okay, and finally, hail is 15% chance to happen. So 15% chance is almost in the middle, but not quite. Right here. And this is where our hail chance is, or our hail likelihood. Okay? So how would we describe our chance of it hailing tomorrow? We cannot say it's impossible because there still is a chance, even though it's small. It can be a 0.005% chance. And unless it's 0, we have to say it's unlikely because it's still possible. So hail we would consider unlikely. Now, we could add adjectives any point along this likelihood scale. So for example, like I said, if it was 0.5 or whatever percent chance, if we really wanted to emphasize how unlikely it is to happen, we could say highly unlikely. Okay? So we can use some of those adjectives to really hone down how likely an event is. This leads us into relative frequency. Okay? And relative frequency is simply a fraction or percentage that tells us how often the event occurs. Kind of like what we did. But this time, we're using what we get from our experiments. So to calculate relative frequency, we take the number of times an event happens and divide it or put it over the total number of times we try it, or our total number of experiments. So, for example, say we're flipping a bottle and we record the landing each time. And here's what we get. Okay. We can calculate the relative frequency by asking ourselves, okay, we wanted the bottle to land upright because that's the coolest, right? How many times did that happen? 1, 2. It only happened twice. Okay, all right, that's fine. But how many times did I try? We tried 5, 10, 15, 20, 1, 2, 3, and don't forget the 2 times it happened, 25 times. So our relative frequency would be 2 25ths, or if we put it in a percentage, 8%. So what would the likelihood here be? Well, 8%, we can't say it's impossible because it does happen. We have to say that the likelihood is unlikely or highly unlikely to happen. Let's let you give it a try. I want you to find a coin, and I want you to flip it as many times as you can for 2 minutes. Pause the video, record what you get, then respond to the following. What are the possible outcomes? How many possible outcomes are there? Can you calculate your own relative frequency of this experiment? And finally, how would you describe the likelihood that you would flip a heads? It's going to be different for everybody depending on how many heads you get. But one thing's going to remain, a couple things are going to remain the same here. Our outcomes. Now remember, an outcome is all of our possibilities. So when we have a coin, there's really only 2 possibilities if we have a fair coin. And what are they? Heads or tails. So how many is that? Remember, how many is a number, not a list. So how many outcomes are there? 2. Okay. In this video, we discussed how to calculate relative frequency of an experiment, describe the likelihood of an event occurring, and how to identify outcomes of any experiment or event. Thanks for watching, and come join me again